So let's just dive right into it. The absolute classic high-stakes debate, buying a house versus renting. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating 20-year financial experiment to answer one deceptively simple question. Who actually wins? We're going to track the whole shebang, mortgage payments, rent hikes, investment returns, across 2 full decades to finally settle this.
Look, you've undoubtedly heard this phrase a million times. Renting is throwing money away, but a mortgage, that's building equity. It perfectly captures this pervasive societal myth we just accept as absolute truth. But over the next few minutes, we're going to use cold hard numbers to completely dismantle this idea and show you exactly how real wealth is actually built.
To do this, let's introduce our 2 identical protagonists for this experiment, Ryan and Steve. Now, they're both 32, they both pull in an $80,000 salary, and after years of aggressive budgeting, they've both scraped together a solid $80,000 in savings. So on paper, financial twins. But their personalities, totally different. Ryan is looking for stability. He wants the backyard, the white picket fence, so he buys a house. Steve, on the other hand, is all about flexibility. He wants mobility, the freedom to just pack up and go, so he keeps renting. 2 identical starting lines, 2 wildly different life choices.
All right, year 0. Ryan finds a great $350,000 house and drops his 20% down payment, which is $70 grand. But then, bam, he hits a brick wall. $10,000. That's the painful reality of closing costs. Title charges, lender fees, taxes, you name it. Ryan's entire $80,000 savings account literally evaporates overnight, just for the paperwork equivalent of applying for citizenship on Mars. He owns a property now, sure, but his cash? Effectively gone.
Now, when we break down the day-to-day reality of their early monthly costs, things get really interesting. Ryan's mortgage itself is about $1,863. But, you know how it goes, add in property taxes, insurance, a maintenance reserve, and his total out-of-pocket jumps to $2,653 a month. Meanwhile, Steve finds a pretty similar rental for a flat $2,000 a month. No taxes, no surprise maintenance. So, the absolute crucial point here is the leftover cash. Steve has $653 left over every month. And the golden rule of this entire experiment? Steve doesn't spend it. He takes his untouched $80,000 savings, plus that $653 difference every single month, and dumps it straight into a diversified stock market index fund. He's not just renting, he is renting and investing. That is huge.
So, here's our 20-year chronological roadmap. We've knocked out year 0, the big decision. Next up, we'll hit year 3, check in at year 10, and then cross the finish line at year 20 to see who's actually sitting on a bigger pile of cash.
Let's fast forward to year 3. Ryan is slowly building a little equity, but he's also getting a crash course in the very physical, very illiquid reality of homeownership. Picture this. It's the weekend and his water heater completely dies. Ryan spends 4 stressful hours sweating over a DIY tutorial on YouTube before throwing in the towel and paying a pro hundreds of dollars to fix it. See, that right there, that's exactly why you need a maintenance budget. Meanwhile, Steve has the exact same plumbing nightmare, but he just makes a free 5-minute phone call to his landlord. Early on, neither guy is a clear financial winner, but man, they are definitely paying very different lifestyle costs.
Fast forward again. By year 10, the landscape shifts dramatically. Ryan's home has appreciated nicely, and because he locked in a fixed mortgage, his principal and interest payment hasn't inflated one bit. His gross home equity is sitting pretty, somewhere around $230,000 to $278,000. Steve is crushing it too. Assuming a 10% average market return, his compounding investment portfolio hits a massive $290,000. Wow, right? But Steve is really starting to feel the sting of inflation. Assuming 3% annual hikes, his rent has steadily climbed to roughly $2,700 a month. Suddenly, Ryan's fixed housing payment is looking like an absolute superpower.
Okay, here we are, year 20, the grand finale. Ryan's house has appreciated substantially, his loan balance has plummeted, and his equity is massive. We're talking potentially up to $607,000. He is undeniably wealthy? But wait, what? Look at Steve's massive lead here. Because Steve kept his original 80 grand invested and diligently added those monthly differences for 20 years straight, his portfolio, compounding at an assumed 10% annual rate, reaches approximately $750,000. Yep, you heard that right. In this specific, strictly disciplined scenario, Steve's renter strategy actually yields a significantly larger financial portfolio.
But, and this is a massive but, does winning the spreadsheet mean winning life? Well, not necessarily. You really have to look at the fundamentally different structural characteristics of their wealth. Ryan's wealth is highly concentrated in one single local housing market, and it's incredibly illiquid. If he suddenly needs 20 grand, it's not like he can just sell 6% of his kitchen, right? However, his mortgage has a finish date. Steve's wealth, on the other hand, is beautifully diversified across thousands of companies, and it's highly liquid. The catch? His housing bill is infinite. Rent never automatically drops to zero.
And that brings us to a crucial psychological side of money, because this isn't just about math. We have to talk about forced saving. This is a massive, often overlooked behavioral advantage for Ryan. His mortgage payment is due whether he feels motivated that month or not. Every single month, a portion of his payment automatically reduces his debt. Ryan doesn't have to actively choose to save, the mortgage just makes that decision for him.
But here's the major reality check for Steve's side of the equation. The spreadsheet assumes he behaves flawlessly for 20 years. And let's be real, humans don't behave like spreadsheets. What if Steve gets a raise and buys a flashier car? What if he takes an expensive vacation, or just slowly upgrades his lifestyle and totally stops investing that monthly difference? Or worse, what if he panic sells during a brutal market crash? If Steve loses his discipline for even a little while, his wealth vanishes, and all he's left with is a giant, never-ending rent bill.
There's another angle we can't ignore, the mobility problem. Imagine, 7 years in, both guys get incredible, once-in-a-lifetime job offers in another state. Steve has incredible flexibility. He gives his landlord notice, packs his bags, and he's gone. That flexibility has real, quantifiable financial value. Ryan, though, he faces major concentration risk. His wealth is literally trapped in one neighborhood. He either has to stomach massive selling costs to get out, or try his luck at being an out-of-state landlord, just praying his new tenant doesn't completely wreck the place. And this right here is exactly why we have to completely shatter that myth we started with. Renting isn't the only way to throw money away. Just think about all the unrecoverable costs homeowners pay just for the sheer privilege of owning the home. Mortgage interest, not equity. Property taxes, not equity. Insurance, maintenance, agent fees when you sell, none of these magically turn into equity. At the end of the day, both Ryan and Steve are paying for a place to live. They're just paying for it in profoundly different ways.
So, how do you actually make this decision for yourself based on the data? Well, here is a concrete 3-step framework. Step 1, check your timeline. Honestly, if you aren't planning to stay put for at least 7 to 10 years, buying is probably too expensive because you just don't have the time to spread out those massive transaction costs. Step 2, calculate the price-to-rent ratio. Basically, just divide the home price by the annual rent of a comparable place. A ratio around 14 or 15 is pretty reasonable, but in hot markets where that ratio is sky-high, renting becomes way more competitive. And finally, Step 3, audit your own financial discipline.
Which brings us to the most direct challenge of this entire explainer. You have to look in the mirror and ask yourself, if I rent, will I actually invest the difference? You have to be radically honest here. Because if you rent for 20 years, but you just spend every dollar you save on lifestyle upgrades, well, you lose the investment advantage entirely. Renting only wins the math if the investing actually happens.
Look, neither path is automatically brilliant, and neither is automatically foolish. The best strategy isn't universally buy or rent. It's about creating a personalized plan that actually fits your timeline, your risk tolerance, and frankly, your human behavior. Which leaves us with one final provocative thought to chew on.